At 17, Elena Hart had learned a painful truth. To her family, she was worth less than a bag of gold. Ever since her mother died, she had become a servant in her own home. She woke before sunrise, cooked their meals, cleaned their rooms, endured their insults, and received nothing in return. Even her own father looked through her as if she didn't exist. Yet despite everything, Elena still hoped.
One day, she thought,
things would change.
one day someone would finally care about her.
She had no idea.
That day was coming.
And it would begin with a knock at the front gate. A knock that would change her life forever.
The entire household froze when they saw it. A black carriage, 6 midnight-colored horses, dozens of armed guards.
And engraved on the door,
The crest of Duke Blackthorn, the most feared.
A man whispered about in taverns. A man noble women feared. A man powerful enough to ruin entire families with a single command.
Until the Duke's steward stepped forward, he unrolled a document, looked directly at Elena, and said 5 words that drained the color from her face.
they should not talk.
We have come for her.
Silence fell over the estate. For her? Why would the ruthless Duke Blackthorn want someone like Elena?
That night, Elena discovered the truth, by accident. She overheard her father arguing with her stepmother.
We had no choice! The creditors would have taken everything.
You should have told me!
You sold her too cheaply, her stepmother replied coldly. Elena stopped breathing. Sold? Her hands trembled. No, surely she misunderstood.
By tomorrow morning, she belongs to Duke Blackthorn. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. A daughter should have been priceless, but her own family had exchanged her for gold. Not one of them cared. And the next morning, they sent her away without shedding a single tear. But as the black carriage carried Elena toward an uncertain fate,
Hundreds of miles away in the capital, another duke sat alone in a candlelit study. Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire, the most powerful noble in the kingdom. Hundreds of names, thousands of dead ends, a search that had lasted nearly 17 years. Everyone told him to give up. Everyone insisted the missing child was gone forever. But Alexander refused.
his lost niece was still alive, and he would never stop searching until he found her.
Suddenly, a messenger burst into the room, breathless, terrified, holding a sealed letter. Alexander broke the seal, read the contents. For the first time in years, hope appeared in his eyes.
The girl living under a name that wasn't hers, and at that very moment, she was on her way to Duke Blackthorn's estate.
Prepare my carriage. My lord, have you finally found her? Grand Duke looked toward the dark window and answered with a voice barely above a whisper.
I pray to the heavens that I have.
By the time Alexander arrived, Elena.
If you enjoyed this story, don't stop here. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next movie. More powerful Duke dramas, hidden heir secrets, betrayals, and emotional twists are coming soon. Stay tuned. Your next favorite story is just one click away. The Blackthorn carriage did not slow even when the road became rough. It cut through the snow-covered forest like a blade through cloth, unstoppable and silent. Inside, Elena Hart sat with her hands pressed tightly together in her lap. Her fingers were numb. Not from the cold outside, but from the shock that refused to leave her body. Sold. The word kept repeating in her mind like a curse she could not escape. Her father's voice, her stepmother's cold agreement, the way they had avoided her eyes as if she were already gone, and now she truly was. Outside the carriage window, the world she had known for 17 years disappeared behind frozen trees. No one had come to stop it. No one even tried. Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself not to cry. Crying would change nothing, it never had. The carriage finally slowed. A heavy iron gate loomed ahead, taller than any building Elena had ever seen. 2 armored guards stood on either side, their faces hidden beneath dark helmets. When they saw the crest on the carriage, they stepped aside immediately. The gates opened, slowly, like the mouth of something alive. Elena's breath caught. Blackthorn Manor rose beyond the gates like a shadow carved into the mountain itself. It was not a home, it was a fortress. Tall stone walls surrounded the estate, stretching farther than the eye could see. Black towers pierced the gray sky. Windows reflected no warmth, only cold light. Even from a distance, Elena could feel it. The place was alive with silence and fear. The carriage stopped. The door opened. A servant in dark uniform stepped forward but did not look at her directly. "Exit," he said simply. Elena hesitated for only a second before stepping down into the snow. The cold bit through her thin shoes instantly. She flinched, but did not move back. Behind her, the carriage doors closed, and just like that, she was alone. The servant gestured toward the manor. This way, no greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of who she was supposed to be. Elena followed silently. As she walked through the massive courtyard, she noticed something strange. The servants avoided her, not with open hostility, but with fear. Whispers followed her footsteps. Is that her? The girl he brought in? Why is she still standing? Elena's chest tightened. What did they expect? Chains? Cages? Blood? She didn't understand. None of this made sense. The servant led her through grand double doors into the manor. The warmth inside was immediate, but it did not feel comforting. It felt controlled, carefully maintained, like everything here was placed exactly where it was supposed to be. Perfect and lifeless. They walked through long corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced nobles. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow her, judging, watching, waiting. Elena felt smaller with every step. Finally, they stopped in front of a large wooden door. "This is your room," the servant said. Elena blinked. "My room?" The servant nodded without expression. "Yes." Before she could ask anything else, he opened the door. Elena stepped inside and froze. The room was larger than anything she had ever seen. A canopy bed stood against the far wall, draped in deep blue silk. A fireplace crackled softly, already lit. Bookshelves filled with neatly arranged novels lined one side of the room. A writing desk sat near a window overlooking the snow-covered gardens. Everything was beautiful, too beautiful. Elena slowly stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the edge of the bed, soft, warm, real. "This can't be for me," she whispered. But there was no one to answer. She turned slowly, looking for any sign of mistake. Nothing, no correction, no guards dragging her away, no punishment waiting, only silence. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Two maids entered carrying folded dresses. "Your clothing, miss," one said politely. Elena frowned. "My clothing?" The maids placed the garments on the bed. Silk dresses, deep reds, soft blues, elegant whites, all finely tailored. Expensive beyond imagination. Elena stared at them. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "I'm not." She stopped. "Not what? Not important? Not worthy?" The maid said nothing. One of them bowed slightly. The Duke ordered them prepared. That name again. Duke Blackthorn. Elena had expected many things. Chains, cold stone walls, a cell, silence, but not this. Not comfort, not luxury, and certainly not respect. Yet even that word felt wrong. Because respect would imply she mattered. And nothing about her past life suggested she did. The maids left without another word. Elena sat slowly on the edge of the bed. Her mind felt heavy, confused, dangerously uncertain. Why would the most feared duke in the kingdom treat her like this? She had heard the stories. People who displeased him vanished. Entire families ruined overnight. Enemies crushed without trial. And yet, she was here, untouched, unchained, unexplained. A soft fire crackled in the fireplace. Elena stood again and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden stretched endlessly. Snow covered every path. Not a single soul moved. The estate felt too large, too quiet, too perfect, like something was being hidden beneath its surface. Her gaze drifted to a distant section of the manor. One wing stood apart from the rest, older, darker, almost sealed away. Every instinct told her not to look at it too long, but she did anyway. Something about that place felt wrong. Not dangerous in an obvious way, but forbidden, as if the truth itself was locked behind its walls. A knock came at the door this time. She hesitated before answering. "Come in." A single servant entered. Older than the others, her eyes avoided Elena's face. "I've been assigned to assist you," she said. Elena studied her carefully. "You don't look happy about that." The servant stiffened slightly. "I serve the household," she replied carefully. "That doesn't answer my question." Silence. Then finally, "This estate has rules," the servant said quietly. "Some things are not to be questioned." Elena frowned. "Like what?" The servant's eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway. Then back to Elena, the west wing. Elena's heart shifted slightly. The servant shook her head. "No one goes there. Why not?" But the woman had already turned away. "Dinner will be served soon," she said quickly. "You are expected to attend." And then she left. Elena stood still for a long moment. No one goes there. That answer only made her more curious and more uneasy. Night fell slowly over Blackthorn Manor. The dinner hall was vast. A long table stretched across the room, empty except for a few candles. Elena entered cautiously. Servants lined the walls. All of them stood perfectly still, as if afraid to breathe too loudly. Then he arrived. Duke Damien Blackthorn. Elena turned instinctively. He walked into the room without announcement, without ceremony, without expression, tall, silent, controlled. Everything about him felt sharp, dangerous, like a blade that never needed to be drawn to be feared. He did not look at her, not even once. He sat at the head of the table. Dinner began. Silence followed immediately. Elena waited for something, anything, a question, an order, an explanation. But nothing came. Minutes passed. The Duke did not speak. No one else dared to. Elena finally broke the silence. "Your Grace?" The room froze. Servant stiffened instantly. Damien looked up slowly. His gray eyes met hers, cold, unreadable. "Yes." "Ipe." Elena hesitated. "Thank you for the room." A pause. "Then if it meets your needs, there is no issue," he said. That was it. No emotion. No acknowledgement. Just distance. Elena nodded slowly. "Okay." And just like that, the conversation ended. Dinner continued in silence. When it was over, Damien stood and left without another word. No one followed him. No one dared. Elena was escorted back to her room afterward. The manor felt even quieter at night. Too quiet, like the silence itself was watching her. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment. Her thoughts were tangled. Nothing about this made sense. She walked to the window again. The west wing stood in the distance. Dark still, waiting. Something about it called to her in a way she could not explain. Hours passed. Eventually, exhaustion pulled at her. She changed into one of the silk gowns, still uncomfortable with the idea that it belonged to her, and lay down on the bed. Sleep came slowly, uneasily. Deep into the night, a sound woke her. Click. Elena opened her eyes instantly. Silence. Moonlight spilled through the window. Everything looked the same, but something felt different. She sat up. The door. It was slightly open. Her heart tightened. She was certain she had closed it. Slowly, she stepped out of bed. The room was empty. No movement, no shadow, no sound. But something was there. She felt it, like a presence that had already left. She turned toward the bedside table and froze. Something rested on it. Something that had not been there before. A key, silver, old and carefully placed. Elena stepped closer slowly. Her breath caught as she picked it up. Cold metal, heavy in her hand. She turned it over and saw it, an engraved symbol. A royal crest she had never seen before. Strange, elegant, familiar in a way she could not understand. Her pulse quickened because she knew, deep inside, that this was not random. Someone had been in her room, and they had left this behind for her. But the most terrifying thought of all was this. They wanted her to find it. And somewhere deep inside Blackthorn Manor, something had just begun to wake up. Elena did not sleep after finding the key. She sat upright in bed until morning, the silver object resting in her palm like a burning secret. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same image, a symbol she didn't recognize. Elegant, royal, wrong. It did not belong in her life. And yet, it felt like it had always been there. As dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor, Elena made a decision she did not fully understand. She would find the door it opened. Not because she was brave, but because she was no longer willing to live inside unanswered questions. The manor was quieter in the early hours, too quiet. Servants moved like shadows through the corridors, never lingering, never speaking above whispers, and always avoiding her gaze. Elena noticed it more clearly now. Before she thought it was fear of the Duke. Now she wasn't so sure. Now it felt directed, like they were afraid of her, or what she might become. She tightened her grip on the silver key inside her pocket and walked. She didn't ask for directions. She didn't need to. Something inside her already knew where to go. Every step she took deeper into the manor felt heavier than the last. The walls changed subtly as she moved. Newer stone gave way to older architecture. Gold decorations faded into dull iron. Warm light became dim candlelight, and then she saw it. A gate, tall, black, surrounded by iron chains that were not decorative. They were intentional. Above it, carved into stone, were two words. West Wing. Elena stopped. Her breath slowed. This was it. The place every servant feared. The place no one would speak about. The place Mrs. Whitmore had warned her to forget. Elena reached into her pocket. The silver key felt colder now, heavier, like it knew where it belonged. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she stepped forward. The lock looked ancient, unused, abandoned. But when she inserted the key, click! The sound echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Elena froze. The gate unlocked instantly, no resistance, no struggle. As if it had been waiting for her. The iron doors creaked open slowly, and the air changed. The moment she stepped inside, she felt it. A shift, not physical, something deeper. The West Wing did not feel like the rest of the manor. It felt sealed, preserved. Stuff seemed different here. Dust floated through pale beams of light that entered through tall, forgotten windows. The silence was absolute. Not empty, intentional. Elena stepped forward slowly. Her footsteps echoed too loudly. She tightened her arms around herself instinctively. The hallway stretched long and narrow. Portraits lined both sides, dozens of them, then hundreds. Noble families, old kings, dukes, duchesses, generals whose names she did not recognize. Some paintings were so old the faces had begun to fade, yet all of them had one thing in common. They were watching her, not in imagination. In feeling, every portrait seemed to follow her movement. Elena swallowed hard and kept walking. "What is this place?" she whispered. No answer came, only silence. The deeper she went, the more the air felt heavier, like the manor itself was holding its breath. Then she saw something unusual, a section of portraits covered in black cloth, deliberately hidden. Elena reached out slightly, then stopped herself. "No," she muttered. "Don't touch anything," but curiosity had already taken root. She moved past them quickly. The hallway eventually widened into a grand gallery, and that was when everything changed. Elena stopped walking. Her entire body went still. The room was massive, far larger than anything she had seen in the manor. The ceiling stretched high above, painted with faded celestial murals. Chandeliers hung like frozen stars, and every single wall, was covered in portraits. Not random ones. Not decorative ones. These were arranged, organized, structured like a record, like history. Elena stepped forward slowly, her eyes scanned the faces. And then she felt it. A pull, not emotional, physical. Her feet stopped on their own, her breath caught. Because directly ahead, at the center of the gallery, was a portrait that did not belong. Elena's heart stopped completely. "No," the word barely left her lips. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She walked toward it slowly. Too slowly. As if approaching something forbidden. The painting showed a woman standing beneath a pale garden arch. Soft sunlight touched her face. She wore a simple, noble gown, nothing extravagant, nothing grand, but her beauty was unmistakable, gentle, warm, familiar. Elena's hands began to shake because the face in the painting was her mother. Not similar, not close, identical, the same eyes. The same soft expression, the same slight curve of the lips when she smiled. Elena stumbled forward, her hand lifted instinctively. "No, that's impossible." Her fingers stopped just inches from the canvas, her throat tightened painfully. Her mother had always been poor. A quiet woman, someone who never spoke about her past, someone who avoided questions about her family. But this did not belong to poverty. This belonged to royalty. Her eyes dropped to the name engraved beneath the painting. Lady Isabella Ravenshire. Elena froze. Ravenshire. She had seen that name before, the key, the symbol, the West Wing. Everything snapped together in pieces she did not yet understand. Her chest tightened painfully. "Isabella Ravenshire," she whispered. Her voice echoed softly in the empty hall. Elena stepped back slowly. Her mind was spinning. Her mother, Lady Isabella, was a noble, a high-ranking noble. But that meant everything she had been told was incomplete, or false, or hidden. A sound broke through the silence. A slow echo of footsteps. Elena stiffened immediately, footsteps behind her. Deliberate, controlled, familiar. Her heart began to race instantly. She turned slowly and froze. Duke Damien Blackthorne stood at the entrance of the gallery. His presence filled the entire space instantly. The air felt heavier, colder, more dangerous. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Because for the first time since Elena had met him, Duke Blackthorne was not composed. His eyes were locked on her, then shifted to the painting. And everything in his expression changed. Shock, pure, unfiltered. His usual control fractured instantly. His face went pale, as if he had seen something impossible. Lena took a small step back. "Your Grace," she said carefully, but he did not respond. He walked forward slowly, each step echoing like a warning. His gaze never left the portrait, never left the face of Lady Isabella Ravenshire. Elena watched him carefully. "Do you know her?" she asked quietly. That question seemed to strike him harder than anything else. Finally, his voice came out low, strained. "Who allowed you in here?" The words were sharp, but beneath them something else trembled. Fear. Not fear of Elena, fear of what she had discovered. Elena held her ground, though her heart was pounding violently. "I used a key," she said. At the word key, Damien's eyes flickered instantly, just for a fraction of a second. But Elena saw it, recognition, then something darker, regret. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. "Where did you get that key?" he asked. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back at the portrait, then at him. My mother, she said quietly. That was when everything stopped. The Duke went completely still. The silence between them stretched endlessly. Then, barely above a whisper, your mother. His voice broke slightly on the words. Elena's heart tightened. What do you know about her? She demanded. Damien did not answer, but his eyes were no longer cold. They were shaken, as if something buried for years had just been uncovered. Something that should never have been found. And in that moment, Elena realized the truth was not just hidden in this room. It was alive, and it was waking up. The silence after Damien's question did not break. It deepened. Elena stood in the center of the West Wing gallery, her heart still hammering from the shock of the portrait, the name beneath it, and the way the Duke had reacted. Lady Isabella Ravenshire, her mother's face, a noble name she had never heard before entering this manor. And now, Duke Damien Blackthorne stood in front of her like a man who had just seen a ghost return from the dead. Who allowed you in here? His voice still echoed faintly in the vast hall, cold, sharp, but beneath it, something fractured. Elena didn't step back this time. She couldn't. Not anymore. I used the key, she said again more firmly. Damien's gaze flicked immediately to her pocket, to the silver key, then back to her face. His expression tightened. For a moment, he looked like he was deciding something dangerous. Then, without another word, he turned. Everyone out! The command was quiet, but absolute. From the shadows of the gallery entrance, 2 guards immediately stepped forward. Mrs. Whitmore appeared behind them, pale and uneasy. Your Grace, I said out. The repetition carried weight, finality. Even the guards did not hesitate again. One by one, they left. The sound of footsteps faded into the corridor, until only Elena and Damien remained in the West Wing. The silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the manor itself was listening now. Damien walked slowly toward the center of the gallery, not toward Elena. Not away from her, but toward the space between truth and refusal. He stopped beneath the faded ceiling murals. For a long moment, he said nothing. Elena waited, her fingers curled tightly at her sides. Finally, Damien spoke, but not to her, not at first. I made a promise once, he said quietly. Elena frowned slightly. A promise? His jaw tightened. Yes, he turned slightly toward her, but not fully, as if facing her directly made it harder to speak. Years ago, there was a child. Elena's breath caught slightly. A child again. Always a child, Damien continued. A child tied to a bloodline that should not have survived what happened. Elena stepped forward slightly. What happened? His eyes flicked sharply toward her, a warning, but not anger, control. Do not interrupt, he said quietly. Elena stopped. The authority in his voice made her pause instantly. Damien exhaled slowly. That bloodline was erased from the records of the kingdom, he said. Every name, every title, every trace. Elena's heart tightened. Why? Damien hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. That is not for you to know yet. Elena's voice sharpened slightly. Everything here is connected to me. My mother's face is on that painting. The symbol on the key. I know, he cut in. Silence. That response silenced her more than any threat could have. Because it confirmed something terrifying. He did know. Damien turned fully toward her now. His expression was controlled again, but not calm. Never calm. Contained. Like something dangerous held behind glass. I made a promise to protect that child, he said, if she was ever found. Elena stared at him. And you think I'm her? Damien didn't answer immediately. Then carefully, I do not think, he said. I observe. Elena swallowed. That's not an answer. It is the only one you will get. A heavy silence settled again. Elena looked back at the portrait. Her mother, Lady Isabella Ravenshire. Her chest tightened painfully. If my mother was part of this bloodline, she whispered, then why did she hide me? Damien's eyes darkened slightly. At that question, not surprise, not confusion, something closer to burden. That question, he said slowly, is the reason you are still alive. Elena froze. What does that mean? But Damien did not answer. Instead, he turned away and walked toward the exit of the West Wing. Elena followed quickly. Wait, don't just say something like that and leave. He stopped at the doorway, did not turn. You should not have come here, he said. I didn't come here by choice, she replied sharply. That made him pause, just briefly. Then you are here now, he said. That is enough, and he left. The sound of his footsteps faded into the corridor, leaving Elena alone in the vast hall of forgotten portraits. Only now, the silence felt different, heavier, like the truth had moved one step closer but was still out of reach. That evening, Blackthorne Manor was not as quiet as it usually was. Whispers spread faster than footsteps. Servants spoke in corners. Doors closed too quickly when Elena passed. She heard fragments. West Wing, he let her in. The Duke's orders, but no one spoke directly to her. Not anymore. It was as if she had shifted from guest to something else, something uncertain, something watched. Elena returned to her room but did not sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the frozen gardens below. The silver key rested on the beside her. She had tried to ignore it. She couldn't. Every time she looked at it, she remembered Damien's expression. Not fear, not anger, recognition. And something deeper. Something like memory trying to surface. Hours passed. Then a knock. Elena straightened immediately. "Come in." Mrs. Whitmore entered. But she did not look calm. Her face was pale, uneasy. "Miss Hart," she said carefully. Elena frowned. "What is it?" The housekeeper hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There are rumors spreading from the capital." Elena's stomach tightened instantly. "The capital?" Mrs. Whitmore nodded. "About the Ravenshire bloodline." Elena stood slowly. "That name again." Mrs. Whitmore continued. "Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire has begun a full search across the kingdom." Elena's pulse quickened. "Search for what?" Mrs. Whitmore hesitated, then said it clearly. A lost heir. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Elena felt her breath slow. "A child," she repeated quietly. Mrs. Whitmore nodded. 17 years missing. Elena's mind went still. 17 years. Her age. The coincidence pressed too tightly against her thoughts. Mrs. Whitmore looked at her carefully. "And there is more." Elena's voice dropped. "What more?" The housekeeper swallowed. "He is no longer searching quietly. That sentence alone changed everything. Meaning? He is coming personally," Mrs. Whitmore said, "to Blackthorn territory." Elena felt a cold wave run through her chest. Damien knew. He had to know. That was why he reacted the way he did in the West Wing. "Does the Duke know?" she asked quickly. Mrs. Whitmore nodded. "Yes." Elena turned toward the window. Outside, the manor grounds looked peaceful. Too peaceful, as if nothing in the world was about to change. But Elena no longer believed in peace. Not here. Not anymore. That night came too quietly. Blackthorn Manor always felt still after midnight. But this stillness was different, intentional, like something was waiting. Elena lay in bed, but she wasn't asleep. She couldn't be. Every sound outside her room felt sharper. Every silence felt heavier. Then she heard it, a sound outside the window. Not wind, not branches. Movement, slow, measured. Elena sat up immediately. Her heart began to beat faster. She moved quietly to the window and looked down into the courtyard. Nothing. Snow covered everything. Stillness. Then she saw it. A shadow. At the far edge of the estate wall. Just for a second. Gone. Her breath caught. She stepped back instinctively. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. A bell rang somewhere in the manor. Once, then again. Urgent. Footsteps echoed outside her door. Fast, panicked. A servant's voice shouted faintly down the corridor. "Someone has breached the outer wall!" Elena froze. The door to her room burst open. Mrs. Whitmore stood there, breathless, pale. "Miss Hart, stay inside." Elena stepped forward. "What's happening?" The housekeeper hesitated, then said the words that froze the air. "There is an intruder in the estate." Elena's heart dropped. "Where?" Mrs. Whitmore swallowed hard. "Inside the grounds." A distant scream echoed outside, then silence. Another sound, closer, footsteps, moving through the manor, deliberate, unstoppable. Elena backed away slowly. "What do they want?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice dropped to a whisper. "They are asking for you." Elena's blood turned cold. "What?" Before the housekeeper could answer, a shadow crossed the far end of the hallway outside, slow, silent. And then a voice, calm, controlled, unfamiliar. "Where is she?" Elena's breath stopped completely. Mrs. Whitmore stepped in front of her instinctively. But Elena already understood. This was not a normal intruder. This was not a thief. Not a soldier. Not a mistake. This was someone who had come specifically for her. From the darkness beyond the doorway, footsteps stopped. Then the voice spoke again. Closer now. "Bring me the girl or the manor burns." And in that moment, Elena understood something terrifying. The world outside Blackthorn Manor had finally found her, and it was not coming to ask questions. The alarm bells did not stop ringing. They echoed across Blackthorn Manor like a warning that refused to fade. Elena stood frozen in her room as footsteps thundered through the corridors outside. Shouts followed, steel clashing, orders being barked in the Duke's cold, controlled voice. "Seal the east wing. Do not let him escape. Protect the inner estate." Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She had heard stories about Blackthorn Manor, about how no enemy ever left it alive. But hearing it now, seeing it unfold just beyond her door, made it real in a way stories never could. Mrs. Whitmore stood near the doorway, pale as ash. You must stay inside, she said firmly. Elena looked at her. What is happening out there? The housekeeper hesitated, then lowered her voice. An intruder breached the estate. Elena's stomach tightened. Is it the same one who was asking for me? Mrs. Whitmore did not answer immediately. That silence was enough. Elena moved toward the door. I need to see. No, Mrs. Whitmore snapped, sharper than before. If you step out there, you may become exactly what he came for. Elena stopped. Her breath trembled. What does that even mean? But before Mrs. Whitmore could respond, a loud crash echoed from the lower courtyard, followed by a scream, then silence. The kind of silence that comes only after something irreversible. Elena's pulse spiked. Something was wrong, very wrong. Down in the gardens, chaos had already unfolded. Snow-covered hedges were torn apart. Footprints marked frantic movement across the white ground. 2 guards lay unconscious near the stone fountain. Another had fallen near the rose archway, blood staining the snow dark red. And at the center of it all, a man stood breathing heavily, clad in dark worn armor, his face partially covered, an assassin. But not a careless one, a trained one, a precise one. He moved like someone who had already accepted death and still intended to complete his task. Duke Damien Blackthorne stood across from him, completely calm, completely still, a blade already drawn at his side. The air between them was sharp, dangerous. The assassin laughed softly. So the Blackthorne Duke finally shows himself. Damien did not respond. Where is she? The assassin asked. His voice was rough, but focused. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. You will not leave this estate alive. The assassin smiled faintly. I didn't plan to. Then he moved. Fast, a blur of motion cutting through the snow. Steel flashed. Damien blocked instantly. The impact sent a shockwave through the air. Snow scattered violently. The fight was not loud. It was precise, controlled, deadly. Every movement had intention. Every strike meant to kill. Guards rushed in from all sides. Surround him. Don't let him escape. But the assassin did not try to escape. That was what made him dangerous. He was not here to survive. He was here to reach something or someone. Damien's voice cut through the chaos. Alive, he ordered sharply. I want him alive. The guards hesitated. That hesitation cost them. The assassin twisted suddenly. A hidden blade flashed from his sleeve. One guard fell instantly, then another. Snow turned red again. Damien's expression darkened. He moved faster. Their blades clashed again, once, twice. Then Damien struck the assassin's shoulder. A clean hit. The assassin staggered, but he still smiled. You're too late, he whispered. Damien's eyes narrowed. Too late for what? The assassin coughed, blood staining his lips, but his gaze lifted. Not toward Damien, toward the manor, toward Elena. She is already marked. Then he collapsed. The battle ended within minutes. The assassin was captured. Barely alive, bound by chains and dragged into the inner courtyard. Elena arrived just as they brought him in. She had not been allowed outside. But she had come anyway, ignoring every warning, ignoring Mrs. Whitmore's protests, ignoring the fear tightening in her chest. She stood at the edge of the courtyard as guards surrounded the prisoner. Damien turned sharply when he saw her. Take her back, he ordered immediately. No, Elena said. Her voice was firm. I want to know what is happening. Damien's expression tightened. This is not for you to see. But Elena did not move. The assassin lifted his head slowly. Even now, beaten, bleeding, barely alive, his eyes locked onto her instantly. Elena froze because she saw it. Recognition, not confusion, not guessing. Certainty. That's her, the assassin whispered. A guard struck him instantly. Silence. But the assassin only laughed weakly. She's the one. Elena's heart pounded. Who sent you? Damien demanded coldly. The assassin coughed again. Blood spilled onto the snow. I was paid, he said. By who? The assassin smiled faintly. You think I know names? Damien stepped closer. Then what do you know? The assassin's eyes shifted again to Elena. Then he said something that made the entire courtyard go still. She must never reach the capital. Elena's breath caught. What? She whispered. The assassin continued, weaker now. If she reaches the capital, the truth wakes up. Damien's eyes sharpened instantly. Enough, he said coldly. But the assassin's not finished. His voice dropped lower. They erased her once. They will erase her again. Elena took a step back instinctively. What are you talking about? She demanded. But the assassin was fading now, his strength slipping away. Still, he managed one last sentence. She is not just a girl. Then he coughed violently. Blood spilled again. His body trembled. And then, silence. The assassin's head dropped. Dead. The courtyard went still. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the guards seemed unsure what they had just heard. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing. She must never reach the capital. Those words repeated again and again. Damien stepped in front of her instantly. Take her inside, he ordered sharply. This time no one argued. Inside the manor, everything felt different, heavier, like the air itself had changed. Elena sat in her room, unable to calm her breathing. Mrs. Whitmore stood nearby, unusually tense. And Damien did not leave. For the first time since she arrived, he remained in her presence longer than necessary. Watching, thinking, calculating. Finally, Elena broke the silence. Why did he say that? Damien did not answer immediately. You heard a dying man speak nonsense. That was not nonsense, Elena said quickly. He knew something. Damien's eyes flicked to her sharply. You are not to think about this. I am involved whether you like it or not. Silence. Then Damien spoke quietly. From this moment, you will not leave this room alone. Elena frowned. What? You will be escorted at all times. That's ridiculous. It is necessary. Elena stood. You can't just decide that. Damien's gaze hardened. I can, and I have. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. But Elena refused to step back. Why are they coming for me? Damien hesitated, just briefly. Then, I do not yet know. That answer felt more honest than anything else he had said. But it did not comfort her. It made everything worse. Because if even he didn't know, then the danger was bigger than anything they understood. Night fell again over Blackthorn Manor. But no one slept. Guards doubled across every corridor. Torches burned brighter than usual. The estate felt like a fortress preparing for war. Elena stood by her window staring out into the dark gardens. The snow had already covered the blood, as if nothing had happened, as if a man had not died only hours earlier, whispering warnings meant for her. She lifted her hand slightly. The silver key rested on the table beside her. She couldn't stop looking at it, because something about the assassin's words kept echoing in her mind. She is already marked. What did that mean? And why did it feel like the answer was already close? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Damien entered without waiting for permission. He looked different now, more serious than before, less controlled. Elena turned to him immediately. Did you find anything? Damien did not answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the table, toward the silver key. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, I recognized this mark. Elena's breath caught. What? Damien's expression darkened slightly. The symbol on your key, he paused, then continued slowly. It is not just a crest. Elena stepped closer. Then what is it? Damien looked at her, and for the first time, there was something like fear in his eyes. It is a seal, he said quietly. A seal that should not exist anymore. Elena's pulse stopped for a fraction of a second. What does it seal? Damien's gaze hardened. Before he could answer, somewhere outside the manor, a bell rang, slow, deliberate, not an alarm, a signal. Damien turned sharply toward the window. Elena followed his gaze. In the distance, beyond the walls of Blackthorn Manor, a second shadow had appeared, and this one was not alone. Blackthorn Manor had always felt like a place built on silence, but now that silence felt different. It was no longer peaceful, it was watching. Elena had been confined to her room for 3 days. Not as punishment, as protection. That was what Damien called it, protection. But it felt more like a cage made of silk instead of iron. Outside her door, guards stood at every hour. Inside, Mrs. Whitmore brought meals she barely touched, and no one spoke of the assassin again, not openly, not in front of her. But Elena could feel it. Something had changed. Something had cracked open, and she was now standing inside it. Far from Elena's room, deep within the restricted study wing of Blackthorn Manor, Duke Damien Blackthorn stood alone. The room was dimly lit. Only a single lamp burned on his desk. Before him lay sealed documents. Old ones, older than the current royal administration. Documents that should not have survived. And yet, he had found them. Damien's expression was unreadable as he turned another page. Dust-covered records, scratched-out names, entire pages blacked out as if someone had tried to erase history itself. Then he saw it. A partial seal, faded but recognizable. His eyes narrowed. Ravenshire. The name alone carried weight, not political weight, not noble prestige. Something deeper, something dangerous. Damien leaned back slowly in his chair. Impossible, he muttered. The Ravenshire bloodline had been declared extinct nearly 2 decades ago, officially erased after a royal purge, all records destroyed, all surviving members eliminated. That was what the kingdom believed. But the documents in front of him told a different story, a hidden ledger, unauthorized transfers, secret guardianship orders, and one recurring detail, a child, unregistered, unconfirmed, protected. Damien's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. A child who should not exist in any official record, and yet was never declared dead. He exhaled slowly. "So you survived," he whispered. But survival alone was not the issue. Someone had been protecting that child for years, quietly, secretly. Damien's thoughts shifted instantly to Elena. Her face, her questions, the key, the symbol, the portrait in the West Wing. Lady Isabella Ravenshire. The connection was no longer speculation. It was forming into something undeniable. Damien closed the file slowly, and for the first time in years, he felt uncertainty, not fear, but something close to it. Because if Elena truly was tied to the Ravenshire bloodline, then the assassin was not the beginning. He was only the warning. Back in her room, Elena sat by the window, staring at the snow-covered gardens. But she wasn't really seeing them. Her mind felt unsettled. Fragments of something kept surfacing, unwanted, uncontrolled. At first it had been nothing, a sound in her sleep, a voice calling her name. Then it became worse, images, flashes, a corridor she didn't recognize, firelight, smoke, someone running beside her, a woman's hand gripping hers tightly. "Don't look back," the voice whispered. Elena gasped softly and pressed a hand to her forehead. "No, stop." She closed her eyes tightly, but the images came again. A burning hall, screams, metal doors slamming shut, and then a child's voice. Her voice. "Mother!" Elena opened her eyes sharply, breathing hard. Her heart raced uncontrollably. "What is happening to me?" she whispered. She stood quickly, pacing the room. This was not imagination. It felt like memory, but impossible memory, because she had no memory of fire, no memory of running, no memory of any of it. Yet it felt like her body remembered it even when her mind did not. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Whitmore entered cautiously. "Miss Hart?" Elena turned quickly. "I need answers," she said immediately. The housekeeper hesitated. "That is not something I can give you." Elena stepped closer. "Then who can?" Silence. Mrs. Whitmore avoided her gaze. "His Grace is not ready to share everything yet." Elena let out a frustrated breath. "Everyone keeps saying that." Mrs. Whitmore looked at her carefully. "Because some truths are dangerous to hear too early." Elena shook her head. "That doesn't make sense." But Mrs. Whitmore didn't respond. Instead, she placed something on the table, a small sealed box. Elena frowned. "What is this?" "It belonged to your mother," Mrs. Whitmore said quietly. Elena froze. "My mother?" The housekeeper nodded. "It was among her belongings when she first arrived here years ago. The Duke kept it sealed." Elena stared at the box. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached it. "Why give it to me now?" Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. "Because he believes you may be ready." That sentence alone made Elena uneasy. "Ready for what?" Mrs. Whitmore left without another word. The door closed softly behind her. Elena stood in silence for a long moment, then slowly opened the box. Inside were small personal items. A faded ribbon, a broken locket, and a folded piece of paper. Her breath caught instantly. She recognized the handwriting, even though she had never consciously seen it before. It was familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. Elena unfolded the letter carefully. The paper was aged, delicate, like it had been hidden for years. She began to read and froze. The first line said everything. "If you are reading this, they found you." Elena's breath stopped. Her hands trembled violently. She continued reading. "They will come for you. Do not trust the ones who ask questions first. Do not go to the capital under any circumstances." Her heart pounded harder. The Ravenshire bloodline was never meant to survive. Your existence is a mistake to them, but a legacy to others. Elena staggered slightly, gripping the edge of the table. Her mind raced. Ravenshire. Again. Always Ravenshire. She read the final line. "And if this message has reached you, then I am already gone." Elena's breath hitched painfully. Her vision blurred slightly. But she forced herself to continue. At the bottom of the letter, one final sentence, written in darker ink, shaky, urgent, terrifying. "Do not let them take you to the capital." Elena dropped the letter. It fluttered onto the floor like something lifeless. Her hands shook uncontrollably. "What is this?" she whispered. A sudden knock came at the door. Elena spun around instantly. "Who is it?" No answer. The silence outside felt wrong, heavy. Then, a voice familiar. "Damien, open the door." Elena hesitated, then quickly hid the letter inside her sleeve. She opened the door. Damien stood there. His expression was unreadable. But his eyes were different, focused, urgent. "We need to leave," he said immediately. Elena froze. "What?" "There has been movement in the capital," he continued. Elena's pulse quickened. "What kind of movement?" Damien looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "The Grand Duke is no longer searching blindly. Elena's stomach tightened. He knows where you are, he added. Silence. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Elena stared at him. Here? Damien nodded once, and for the first time since she arrived at Blackthorn Manor, the Duke's voice lowered and carried something unmistakable. Warning. They are coming for you. Elena's fingers tightened around the hidden letter in her sleeve, and for the first time, she understood. The West Wing, the assassin, the Ravenshire name, the memories. It was never just history, it was a countdown, and it had just reached its final stage. Blackthorn Manor had always been silent, but on the morning the Grand Duke arrived, even silence seemed afraid. The wind stopped, the birds vanished, and every guard along the outer walls stood straighter than they ever had in their lives. Elena felt it before she saw it, a pressure in the air, like the world itself had become heavier. She stood at her window, watching the gates in the distance. Something was coming. Not an enemy. Not exactly. Something worse. Truth. Behind her, Mrs. Whitmore paced nervously. He is early, she whispered. Elena turned. Who? But she already knew the answer. The housekeeper didn't say it immediately, as if speaking the name aloud would make it real. Then, Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire. The name hit the room like a cold blade. Elena's fingers tightened slightly at her side. Ravenshire, again. Always that name. She had read the letter. She had seen the warnings. And yet nothing had prepared her for the weight that came with hearing it. Spoken aloud, a deep horn sounded outside the manor gates once, then twice, the signal of arrival. The entire estate shifted instantly. Servants rushed into formation. Guards lined the courtyard. The gates began to open, slowly, reluctantly, as if even the manor resisted what was about to enter. Anna stepped closer to the window, and then she saw him. A black carriage unlike any she had ever seen, no insignia of weakness, only authority. It did not move like transport, it moved like judgment. Surrounded by mounted knights in royal armor, the carriage rolled into Blackthorn grounds, and every guard on the estate lowered their gaze slightly. Not out of fear, out of recognition, respect, or something deeper. Mrs. Whitmore spoke quietly. No one stands against him, she said. Elena frowned. Who is he exactly? The housekeeper hesitated. Someone even the Duke answers to in certain matters. Elena's chest tightened. That did not sound like reassurance, it sounded like hierarchy, and she was somewhere at the bottom of it. The carriage stopped. The door opened, and Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire stepped out. Elena saw him clearly for the first time, and something inside her stopped. He was not what she expected. Not older in the way she imagined powerful men to be, not harsh in appearance, instead controlled, composed, dangerously calm. His presence was not loud, it was absolute, the kind of authority that did not need to be announced, it simply existed. The courtyard fell silent. Even the wind did not move. Damien Blackthorn stood at the top of the stairs waiting for him. Two forces of the kingdom. Standing at opposite ends of power, the Grand Duke walked forward, step by step, until he reached the manor entrance. Damien inclined his head slightly. Your Grace. Alexander's eyes did not immediately respond. They were scanning, not the manor, not the guards, but something deeper, searching. Then his gaze shifted and landed directly on Elena. Everything stopped, not metaphorically, not emotionally. Physically, it was as if the entire world had frozen in that instant. Elena felt it, the shift, the sudden attention, the weight of being seen. Truly seen. Alexander did not speak. He simply stared, and in that stare, something inside him, recognition, impossible recognition. His breath slowed slightly. His expression changed for the first time. Not shock, not surprise. Something more fragile. Memory. Elena took a step back instinctively. What? She whispered. Alexander's voice, when it finally came, was low, careful, controlled, but shaken beneath the surface. Where did you find her? The question was not directed at Elena. It was directed at Damien. Damien did not answer immediately. She is under my protection, he said finally. Alexander did not look at him, still staring at Elena. That is not what I asked. The courtyard tightened. Guards shifted uneasily. Elena's heart began to beat faster. What is happening? She asked quietly. No one answered her. Alexander took a step forward. Elena instinctively stepped back again, and then it happened. Alexander froze. Completely, his eyes widened slightly. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for Damien to notice. Enough for Elena to feel it. Something had clicked inside him. Something undeniable. She looks, Alexander whispered. He stopped. His jaw tightened, as if the next words were too dangerous to say aloud. Damien's voice cut through sharply. Your Grace. But Alexander ignored him. His eyes remained locked on Elena. She looks like her. Silence. The entire estate held its breath. Elena frowned. Like who? Alexander finally spoke fully now, his voice quieter, heavier. Isabella Ravenshire. The name struck the air like thunder. Elena's breath caught. That name again. Damien's expression tightened instantly. Careful, he warned. But Alexander didn't move, didn't react to the warning. Instead, he took another step forward and stopped only a few feet from Elena. Close enough now for her to see the faint emotion in his eyes, something buried, something painful. You have her eyes, he said quietly. Elena's voice trembled. I don't understand. Alexander studied her face carefully, as if confirming something impossible. Then his voice lowered. Isabella Ravenshire was my sister. The world tilted. Elena froze, Mrs. Whitmore gasped softly behind her. Damien's expression did not change, but something in his gaze sharpened. Elena stepped back. No! Her voice was barely audible. That's not possible. Alexander did not deny it. Instead, he continued. She disappeared 17 years ago, he said during the purge. Elena's breathing quickened. Purge? Damien spoke quietly now. Enough. But Alexander raised a hand slightly, silencing him. Let me finish. The courtyard went still again. Alexander's eyes returned to Elena. We believed she was dead, he said. But there were rumors, evidence, whispers that she hid something before she vanished. Elena's heart pounded painfully. What does this have to do with me? She whispered. Alexander didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her as if seeing the answer already forming. Then, you are the same age the child would be, he said quietly. Elena froze. No! But her voice lacked certainty now, Alexander continued. And you carry her face. Elena shook her head quickly. I don't remember anything like that. Damien stepped forward slightly. This is not the time. But Alexander finally turned to him. And for the first time, there was tension between the two men. She is not your possession, Alexander said quietly. Damien's eyes darkened. She is under my protection. For now, Alexander replied. The air between them tightened dangerously. Elena stepped back again, her mind spinning. The assassin, the key, the letter Ravenshire name, everything collided at once. No, she whispered again. This can't be happening. Alexander turned back to her. Your mother, he said slowly, was the last known connection to Ravenshire. Elena's breath caught. My mother. Yes, the truth was closing in, too fast, too heavy, too much. And then a distant sound shattered everything. A horn, not from the gates, from outside the estate walls. Then another and another. Alexander's expression changed instantly. Damien turned sharply. What is that? Elena asked. A guard rushed forward shouting, Your Grace! Outer perimeter breached! Another voice followed. Multiple units approaching! Alexander stepped back immediately. Damien's hand went to his blade. Elena froze. What's happening? She asked again. Voice rising then. A massive explosion echoed from the eastern wall of the estate. The ground trembled. Glass shattered in distant windows. Shouts erupted instantly. Attack! Defensive formation! Protect the manor! Elena stumbled slightly. What is this? Damien turned sharply toward her, but before he could answer, another explosion. Closer, and then a guard rushed in, blood on his armor. Your Grace, he shouted. Unknown soldiers are attacking from all sides. Alexander's eyes narrowed instantly. Damien's expression turned lethal. And Elena realized something terrifying. This was not random. This was coordinated, planned, and aimed at one thing, her. A final explosion rocked the manor gates. The massive doors burst open under force. Smoke poured into the courtyard. And through it figures began to appear. Armed, silent, moving in formation, Damien stepped forward instantly. Lock down the estate! Alexander turned toward Elena, his voice urgent now. Stay behind me. But Elena barely heard him, because in that moment, she understood. Whatever truth they were about to reveal, someone was willing to destroy the entire manor to stop it. And she was standing at the center of it. The first soldier stepped into the courtyard, then another and another. And as the estate descended into chaos, Elena's story finally crossed the point of no return. Blackthorn Manor was never meant to be breached. That was what everyone believed. For generations, it had stood like a fortress carved from stone and fear, untouched, unchallenged, unbroken, until today. Now it burned. Not with fire alone, but with chaos. Steel clashed against steel in the courtyards. Shouts echoed through the corridors. Guards ran through smoke-filled halls as unknown soldiers poured into the estate from multiple directions. The carefully ordered world of Blackthorn had collapsed into war. Elena stood frozen for only a second before Damien's hand gripped her wrist. Move, he ordered sharply. No hesitation, no softness, just urgency. Alexander Ravenshire stepped in immediately beside them, his voice cutting through the noise. "Stay behind us!" Elena's breath was uneven. "What is happening?" she shouted over the chaos. But no one had time to answer. Another explosion rocked the eastern wall. Stones shattered, the ground trembled violently, and through the broken gate, more attackers entered. Damien's expression hardened instantly. "They came prepared," he muttered. Alexander's eyes scanned the battlefield with cold precision. "This is not a raid," he said quietly. "This is erasure." Elena turned sharply. "Erasure?" But before either man could respond, a group of soldiers broke through the smoke directly ahead. Black armor, no insignia, no allegiance. Only one purpose: kill anything that moved. Damien stepped forward instantly. "Get her out of here," he ordered. A guard hesitated. "Your Grace, I said move." The guard grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her toward the inner corridors. Elena resisted. "No, I'm not leaving." But Damien's voice cut through again. "You will if you want to live." That was the first time he said it like that. Not as a command, but as truth. Alexander moved beside them. "I will cover the rear," he said calmly. Damien gave him a sharp glance. "You trust this estate enough to fight inside it?" Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. "I trust that if she dies here, the kingdom loses something it doesn't understand yet." That answer silenced even Damien for a moment. Then, the battle swallowed them again. Inside the manor, chaos spread faster than fire. Servants ran screaming through hallways. Guards clashed with intruders in narrow corridors where space itself became a weapon. The once silent estate echoed with violence. Elena was dragged through the corridors by two guards as Damien and Alexander split off to engage attackers. She looked back once and saw Damien fighting, not like a noble, not like a duke, but like something far more dangerous, efficient, cold, relentless. Every movement was precise, every strike final. He did not waste motion, he did not hesitate. And every attacker who reached him fell before they could understand what hit them. Elena's breath caught. She had never seen him like this before. Not distant, not controlled, but fully unleashed. A protector who had decided she would not be taken. Behind her, Alexander moved with equal precision, cutting through attackers with calculated efficiency. Two different men, two different powers. One shared objective: keep her alive. But even that was not enough, because the enemy kept coming. More soldiers poured into the manor from hidden entrances, from the West Wincan corridors, from secret passages Elena did not even know existed. "Where are they all coming from?" one guard shouted. Damien's voice cut through the chaos. "They have inside knowledge." That realization changed everything. This was not random. Someone had guided them, or opened the doors from within. Elena was pushed into a side chamber for safety. A small storage room behind the east corridor. The guards stood at the door, weapons drawn. "Stay here," one ordered. Before Elena could respond, they were gone. Running back into the fight, Elena stood alone, breathing hard. The sounds of battle muffled slightly behind the thick stone walls. For a moment she felt disconnected, as if the world had split in two. One where she stood still, and one where everything else burned. Then, a voice came from the hallway outside. Soft, painful, a groan. Elena froze. She stepped toward the door carefully. Another sound. Closer. Someone was there. She hesitated, then slowly opened the door. A guard lay slumped against the wall outside, blood staining his armor, barely alive. Elena rushed forward instantly. "Are you okay?" The man coughed weakly. His eyes flickered open. "Miss Hart." Elena knelt beside him. "What happened?" His hand trembled as he grabbed her sleeve. "They're not stopping. Who are they?" she asked urgently. The guard coughed again. "They're looking for you." Elena's stomach tightened. "Why me?" The guard's breathing grew weaker. "They said you must not reach the capital." Elena froze. That phrase again. The assassin's words. Her mother's letter. Everything aligned into something terrifying. "Why?" she whispered. The guard struggled to speak. "They fear the truth." Elena leaned closer. "What truth?" But before he could answer, his eyes widened slightly, then dimmed, and went still. Elena staggered back. No, the man was gone, dead. Silence filled the corridor for a moment. Then, footsteps. Elena spun instantly. From the smoke-filled hall beyond, a soldier stepped forward. Black armor, no insignia, the same attackers. He saw her immediately, and raised his weapon. Elena backed away quickly, but there was nowhere to run then. A blade flashed, but before it reached her, steel met steel. Damien appeared instantly between them. The attacker was thrown back violently. Elena's breath caught. "Damien, stay behind me," he said sharply. The soldier recovered quickly and attacked again. But Damien ended it in seconds. One strike, clean final. The man collapsed. Silence returned briefly. Damien turned to Elena immediately. Are you injured? Elena shook her head quickly. No. His gaze sharpened. Good. We move. Where? To safety. Elena frowned. There is no safety in this place anymore. That made him pause briefly then. You're right, he said quietly. That admission alone felt heavy. They moved again through the corridors. Alexander rejoined them moments later, blood on his sleeve but still composed. The attackers are organized, he said. They know the layout. Damien's eyes darkened. That confirms inside help, Alexander nodded. Yes, Elena's chest tightened. Someone inside the manor betrayed you? Damien did not answer immediately. Then, yes. Elena swallowed hard. Why would someone do that? Alexander's gaze shifted slightly. Because they want you erased before we learn what you are. Elena felt her stomach drop. Erased. That word again. They reached a sealed chamber near the inner hall. Damien shut the door behind them, locked it instantly. For the first time in what felt like hours, silence. But it was fragile, temporary. Outside, the battle still raged. Damien turned to Alexander. We need answers now. Alexander nodded. I agree. Elena stepped forward. I'm tired of not understanding anything. Damien looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then we interrogate one of them. They found a captured enemy minutes later. Dragged into the chamber, wounded, barely conscious. Damien stood over him. Who sent you? The man laughed weakly. Doesn't matter, Damien's voice lowered. It matters to me. The soldier coughed blood. You won't stop it. Alexander stepped closer. Stop what? The man's eyes shifted toward Elena. And then he smiled. That smile chilled the lost. Silence. Elena froze. What? The soldier coughed again. She was hidden. Damien's expression tightened instantly. By who? The man's voice dropped, barely audible. On purpose! Elena's breath stopped. Alexander went still. Damien's eyes darkened. Explain. But the soldier only smiled faintly. They will finish what they started. Then his head dropped. Gone. Silence. Elena stood frozen, hidden on purpose. The words echoed in her mind again and again. Damien stepped back slightly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Alexander exhaled slowly. This changes everything, he said quietly. Elena's voice trembled. Hidden by who? No one answered. Because now, even they no longer knew where the truth began, or who had buried it first. The captured soldier's final words did not fade. They lingered, echoing through the sealed chamber of Blackthorn Manor like a curse that refused to dissolve. She was hidden, on purpose. Elena stood completely still. Her mind repeated the phrase over and over again, searching for meaning, refusing to accept it at face value. Hidden, on purpose. Damien stood near the door, unmoving. Alexander Ravenshire had turned slightly away, his expression unreadable. But his silence spoke louder than words. For the first time since the attack began, no one rushed, no one fought, no one commanded. Because the battlefield outside no longer mattered. Something far deeper had just cracked open inside that room. Elena finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother hid me? Damien looked at her immediately, but he did not answer right away. That hesitation told her everything. Alexander stepped closer to the prisoner's body, now lifeless on the floor. His voice was low. We need to stop thinking in fragments. Elena frowned slightly. What does that mean? Alexander turned toward her fully. It means your life was not random. Silence, he continued. Your mother was not just Lady Isabella Ravenshire. Damien's expression tightened slightly at the name. Alexander's tone remained steady. She was the last legitimate heir of Ravenshire. Elena's breath caught. What? Damien finally spoke. That is not in any surviving record. Alexander nodded slowly. Because the records were erased. Chest tightened. Erased by who? Alexander paused, then said carefully, the Royal Council. The room went still again. Even Damien's expression sharpened at that. Elena stepped back slightly. Why would they erase an entire noble house? Alexander's gaze darkened. Because Ravenshire was not just a noble family. He paused, then added, it was power. Elena felt a cold weight settle in her chest. What kind of power? Damien finally spoke, voice controlled but tense. A power that could shift alliances inside the kingdom. Alexander nodded. And threaten the throne itself. Elena shook her head slowly. No, my mother wasn't. She was just what? Alexander interrupted gently. A woman in a forgotten estate? A name erased from history? A portrait hidden behind locked walls? Elena's voice faltered. She raised me. Alexander's expression softened slightly but remained firm. And she hid you. Silence. The words hit differently this time. Not like accusation. Like truth settling into place. Damien stepped forward. Continue, he said. Alexander exhaled slowly. There was a coup attempt 17 years ago, he said. Elena froze. That coincides with your birth, he added. Elena's heart tightened painfully. Alexander continued. The Ravenshire line was targeted because they held legitimacy over a succession claim no one wanted to acknowledge. Elena frowned. Succession claim? Damien's voice turned sharper. The Ravenshire bloodline had direct ties to the founding monarchy. Silence. Elena's mind struggled to process it. So, what are you saying? Alexander looked directly at her. I am saying your mother was not just a noble. A pause. She was next in line for a throne that was never supposed to exist in the public record. Elena stepped back again. That's impossible, but her voice lacked conviction now, because pieces were aligning too quickly, too painfully. Damien spoke quietly. And when the coup happened, Alexander's expression darkened. She was betrayed. Elena's breath caught. By who? Alexander hesitated, then answered, someone inside the royal council. Silence fell again, heavy, suffocating. Elena's voice trembled. What did they do to her? Alexander's eyes lowered slightly. They hunted her, Damien added coldly, and erased her existence from every official document in the kingdom. Elena shook her head slowly. No, she escaped. She raised me. She was alive. Alexander nodded slightly. She was alive. A pause. Until she wasn't. Elena froze completely. Her mind resisted them. No. Her voice cracked slightly. She's gone? Alexander did not respond immediately. Damien answered instead. We believe she died protecting you. Silence. Elena's hands trembled slightly. Protecting me from what? Alexander stepped closer. From the same people who are now trying to erase you. The room felt colder. Elena whispered. So it never stopped. Damien shook his head slightly. No, Alexander's voice grew heavier. It evolved. Elena's chest tightened. Why hide me then? She asked quickly. If she was powerful, if she had allies, why not fight back? Alexander's expression darkened. Because she realized something. Elena waited. Damien finished the thought. That the coup was not complete. Silence. Alexander nodded. There were survivors inside the royal council. People who remained in power after the purge. Elena frowned. So the ones who attacked her are still in control. Yes, Alexander said. Elena felt her breath shorten. And they still want me gone. Alexander's gaze sharpened slightly. More than ever. Damien stepped closer. Because your existence proves the Ravenshire line was not erased completely. Elena shook her head. I don't even know what I am supposed to be. Alexander looked at her directly. You are what they failed to destroy. Silence. That sentence settled heavily in the room. Elena's voice dropped. I don't want power. I don't want any of this. Damien's expression softened slightly, but only briefly. It is not a matter of want anymore. Alexander nodded. It is a matter of survival. Outside the chamber, the sounds of battle had begun to fade. The attack was ending, but the war beneath it was just beginning. Hours later, Blackthorn Manor was no longer under siege. The attackers had retreated or been eliminated. Smoke still lingered in the corridors, blood-stained parts of the courtyard, but silence had returned. A dangerous kind of silence. The kind that followed truth being revealed too quickly. Elena sat alone in a smaller chamber, wrapped in a cloak. She had not spoken much since the interrogation. Her mind refused to settle. Every explanation only created more questions. The door opened quietly. Damien entered. He no longer wore his battle stance, but his presence still carried weight. He closed the door behind him. You should rest, he said. Elena did not look at him. I can't. Silence. Damien stepped closer. You understand now, he said. Elena finally looked up. No, she replied honestly. I understand pieces, not the whole. Damien studied her carefully. Your mother protected you from a war that never ended. Elena's voice was quiet. And now I am part of it. Damien did not deny it. That silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, far beyond Blackthorn lands in the capital, a chamber deep within the royal council hall remained lit, despite the hour, despite the unrest. Inside, robed figures sat around a circular table. Their faces were partially hidden, but their voices were calm, measured. One spoke first. The Blackthorn estate failed to eliminate her, another replied coldly. She is alive. A third voice followed. And now Ravenshire has confirmed her existence. Silence. Then the first voice again. Then the final phase begins. A pause. And Blackthorn? He is no longer neutral. A long silence followed. Then a new voice. Older, deeper, carrying authority that even the council seemed to respect. She should have died with her mother. The others fell silent immediately. The voice continued, but she didn't. A pause. And now she must be handled personally. One council member spoke carefully. Your position is still secure, my lord. A faint sound of movement, almost like a smile. Of course it is, then. The final revelation. After all, I have been sitting in this council for 17 years. Silence, and no one has questioned it. The chamber remained still, because the traitor was not an outsider, not an assassin, not a rebel, but one of them. Someone who had survived the purge. Someone who had helped erase the Ravenshire line from history, and now someone who would ensure it stayed erased, no matter what it took, even if it meant burning the kingdom itself. Back in Blackthorn Manor, Elena stood alone at her window, unaware that the enemy she was being hunted by was already inside the highest seat of power in the kingdom. The capital had never looked more beautiful, and yet Elena had never felt more like she was walking into a grave. The royal courthouse rose above the city like a monument carved from judgment itself, white stone pillars, towering arches, and banners bearing the crown of the kingdom. But to Elena, it was not a symbol of justice. It was a cage waiting to close. She stood between two men as she was escorted up the marble steps. Duke Damien Blackthorn on her left, Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire on her right. Two forces of power, two shields, but even they could not hide what this moment truly was. A trial, a verdict already being written. Elena's hands trembled slightly beneath her cloak. She whispered, barely audible, I didn't do anything wrong. Damien did not look at her, but his voice was steady. I know. Alexander's gaze remained forward. This is not about guilt, he said quietly. It never was. That did not comfort her. It only confirmed her fear. They were not here to prove innocence. They were here to survive judgment already decided by others. Inside the royal court, the atmosphere was suffocating. Rows of nobles filled the chamber. Judges sat elevated on stone thrones carved with the royal seal, and at the center, Elena stood alone. Damien and Alexander positioned themselves behind her, defiant in presence but restricted by protocol. Whispers spread instantly. That is her? The supposed Ravenshire heir. She looks ordinary. A servant girl from nowhere. Elena heard every word, each one sharper than the last. Then the chamber doors opened again, and her world collapsed further. Her family entered, her father, her stepmother, her stepsisters, dressed in fine garments they had never earned. Elena's breath caught. Her father looked at her without emotion. Her stepmother smiled faintly, not with warmth, with satisfaction. Elena whispered, Why are they here? Damien's voice dropped. They were summoned as witnesses. Alexander's expression hardened slightly. Or tools, the court began. A gavel struck stone, present the accused, the high judge declared. A councilman stepped forward. Elena Hart, he announced, is accused of falsely claiming lineage to the Ravenshire bloodline and deceiving noble. Authority. A wave of murmurs swept through the hall. Elena's stomach tightened. That's not true, she whispered. But her voice was swallowed instantly. The judge raised a hand. Let testimony begin. Her father stepped forward first. Elena froze. He did not look at her like a daughter. He looked at her like property he had already sold twice. She was born in my household, he said calmly. Elena's eyes widened slightly. That is correct, he continued. A common girl, no noble blood, no royal lineage. A lie, a deliberate, practiced lie. Elena shook her head. No, that's not. The judge struck the gavel. Silence. Damien stepped forward immediately. That statement is false, he said firmly. The court murmured. Alexander followed. We have verified records suppressed by the council itself, he added. A ripple of tension spread across the room. The judge narrowed his eyes. Proceed. Damien presented the first evidence. Ancient documents. Recovered Ravenshire seals. Fragments of erased lineage records. The court examined them carefully. Whispers grew louder. That seal, it is authentic. That cannot be forged. Elena felt something shift in the room. For the first time, doubt entered the court. Alexander stepped forward next. He placed a sealed royal archive document onto the chamber table. This confirms Lady Isabella Ravenshire's existence as the last legitimate heir, he said. Gasps spread through the nobles. Elena's heart pounded. Her mother's name echoed in the chamber like a ghost returning to life. Then Damien added, and this confirms her survival beyond the purge. The room erupted into murmurs. The judge struck the gavel again. Order! But order was slipping. The court was shifting. Dangerously. Elena felt it. Hope. Fragile, but real. Then her stepmother stepped forward. Elena's body tensed instantly. The woman smiled faintly, a calculated smile. My husband speaks truth, she said softly. Elena froze. What? But incomplete truth, the woman added. The court quieted again. Elena frowned. What is she doing? She whispered. Her stepmother continued. She was a burden, she said, gesturing toward Elena, a child with no value, no status, no importance. Elena's fists tightened. That is not true, but the stepmother ignored her, and when Duke Blackthorn came for her, she said, we assumed it was mercy, a lie wrapped in cruelty. The nobles murmured again, but this time, the shift was different. Doubt returned. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Damien stepped forward slightly. She is lying, he said coldly. But the damage had begun. The court was no longer certain, and uncertainty was dangerous. The judge leaned forward. This court must determine identity beyond doubt. A councilman rose. There is one final method, he said. Elena frowned. What method? She whispered. The councilman turned toward her. Blood verification. Silence. Elena stiffened. Damien's expression darkened instantly. No, Alexander's voice followed immediately. That is outdated. But the judge raised a hand. It is permitted under ancient royal law. Elena felt her breath shorten. Blood. They wanted her blood. The councilman approached with a ceremonial blade. Elena stepped back instinctively. No! Damien moved instantly. Touch her and you lose your hand. The chamber froze. Alexander's voice dropped. This is a provocation. But the judge did not stop it. Proceed. The councilman stepped closer. Elena trembled, and then a voice echoed from the back of the chamber. Wait! Everyone turned. A royal messenger entered quickly, breathless. He approached the judge and whispered urgently. The judge's expression changed instantly. Confusion, then concern, then something darker. He stood slowly. New decree has arrived. Elena's heart dropped. What decree? She whispered. The judge opened the sealed scroll. Read it silently. Then looked up. At Elena, silence filled the entire chamber. Even Damien went still. Even Alexander then. The judge spoke, and the world ended. Elena Ravenshire, he announced, is to be executed at sunrise. The chamber erupted instantly. Gasps, shouts, shock. Damien's expression turned to stone. Alexander's eyes darkened dangerously. Elena froze completely. No, she whispered. The judge struck the gavel once. Final, absolute. Court is adjourned. Guards moved instantly. Chains clattered. Elena was seized. Damien stepped forward immediately. Release her. But royal guards blocked him. Alexander's voice turned sharp. This decree is unlawful. The judge did not respond. Only said quietly, it comes from the highest authority. Silence. Elena's breath trembled. The highest authority, she repeated softly, and in that moment, she understood. This was not justice. This was elimination. The truth had become too dangerous to be spoken, so they chose silence, permanent silence. As she was dragged away, Elena looked back once, at Damien, at Alexander, at the collapsing court. And for the first time, she understood the cost of her existence. It was not just her life. It was a kingdom willing to burn truth to preserve lies, and sunrise was closer than anyone believed. Sunrise was no longer a symbol of hope. It was a countdown. Elena sat in the cold stone chamber beneath the royal courthouse, wrists bound in ceremonial chains reserved for traitors of the crown. The kind of chains that were not meant to hold strength, only erase it. Outside, the kingdom was already waking. By sunrise, she would either be dead, or something far worse in the eyes of those who feared her name. A lie made permanent. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, heavy, fast. Then a crash. Chamber door exploded inward. Elena flinched instinctively, but no guard entered. Only silence. And then Damien Blackthorn stepped through the smoke, his coat torn, his blade still dripping. Behind him, royal guards lay unconscious in the corridor. He had not come quietly. He had not come diplomatically. He had come like war. Elena's breath caught. Damien, she whispered. His eyes met hers instantly. Not cold, not distant, focused, alive. I told you I would not let them take you, he said. Elena shook her head slightly. You're defying the crown. A faint, humorless exhale left him. I have been defying it since the moment they decided your life was expendable. He stepped forward and shattered the chains with a single strike. Metal fell away. Elena stumbled slightly as freedom hit her body like shock. But before she could speak, another presence arrived. Slow, controlled, commanding. Grand Duke Alexander Ravenshire entered the chamber, and everything changed again. Not with violence, but with truth. He looked at Elena first, then at Damien, then said quietly, "It is time the kingdom remembers what it erased." Within hours, the royal capital became unrecognizable. News spread faster than guards could contain it. The Duke of Blackthorn had attacked royal detention halls. The Grand Duke of Ravenshire had turned against the council, and the girl they tried to execute was no longer hidden. She was exposed. and protected. The royal court reconvened under emergency decree. But this time it was not the same court. Damien stood before them openly, no longer restrained. No longer bound by loyalty to silence, Alexander stood beside him, and between them Elena, not as prisoner, not as accused, but as truth. The high judge, slightly. "This is treason," he declared weakly. Damien's voice cut through the chamber. "Treason is erasing an innocent bloodline for power." Murmurs spread through the nobles. Alexander stepped forward. "The Ravenshire massacre was not a purge," he said. Silence fell instantly. "It was a coordinated elimination of the rightful succession line," he continued. "Orchestrated by members of this council." Gasps, shock, fear. The judge slammed his gavel. "Blasphemy!" But Alexander raised a sealed document, a royal cipher, older than the current crown, authentic, undeniable. "This is the original Ravenshire succession record," he said. Whispers erupted. "That seal is impossible to forge. It's real." They destroyed all copies. Damien stepped forward next, and yet one survived. He turned slightly toward Elena, because it was hidden to protect her. Elena's heart pounded. Alexander nodded. "Lady Isabella Ravenshire." The last heir entrusted her daughter to secrecy before her assassination. The chamber went silent again. Elena's voice was small. "My mother! Knew?" Alexander looked at her. "She knew they would come for you." A pause. "So she erased you from the world to save your life." Elena's breath trembled. "All this time?" Damien's gaze softened slightly. "You were never abandoned," he said quietly. "You were protected." The truth landed differently this time. Not as pain, but as understanding. A sudden movement in the chamber shattered the fragile silence. One of the council members stood abruptly, too quickly, too nervously. "You cannot believe this," he shouted. But Alexander's eyes narrowed instantly. "Step forward," he said. The man hesitated, then tried to retreat. Too late. Guards moved. Damien stepped in front instantly. "Stop him," he ordered. But the man was already exposed. Alexander's voice turned cold. "You have been silent for 17 years," he said. "That alone is confession." The man shook. "No, this is madness." But Elena stepped forward slowly, her voice steady now. "No," she said quietly. "It's truth." The man looked at her, fear flickering now, recognition. Damien moved closer. "Your name," he demanded. Silence. Then Alexander spoke it, softly, but enough for the entire chamber to hear. "Counselor Varel." The name hit like a blade. Gasps filled the court. Damien's eyes sharpened. "The traitor," he said. Alexander nodded. "One of the architects of the Ravenshire purge." The council erupted. "He is still alive? That's impossible. He should have been executed." But Varel laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "You think removing me changes anything?" he spat. Elena stepped forward. "You tried to kill me," she said. Varel's eyes locked on her. "And yet you are still here." Damien's voice turned lethal. "That ends now." Guards moved instantly. Varel was seized. But even as he was dragged away, he smiled. "I am not the only one," he whispered. Silence. Alexander's expression darkened. "There are more," he admitted quietly. The chamber went still. The war was not over, only revealed. Hours later, the kingdom formally convened under emergency ruling. For the first time in decades, the Ravenshire name was spoken openly. Not as myth, not as rumor, but as truth. Elena stood before the assembled court once more, but this time, no one called her imposter. No one questioned her lineage. The evidence was overwhelming. The council fracture undeniable, and the truth too expensive to deny. The high judge spoke slowly. "By unanimous recognition of restored lineage, Elena Ravenshire is hereby acknowledged as the rightful heir of the Ravenshire bloodline." The chamber exhaled collectively. Years of erasure undone in a single sentence. Elena did not smile. She did not speak. She only felt something shift inside her. Not power, not pride. Identity. For the first time, she was not empty space in history. She was part of it. That night, the palace gardens were quiet. For once, not tense, not afraid, just still. Elena stood alone beneath the moonlight. The silver key, now symbolic of her restored lineage, rested in her hand. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not turn. She already knew who it was. Damien, he stopped beside her. Neither spoke for a moment. Then, he turned slightly toward her. Not as Duke Blackthorn, not as a weapon of the crown, but as a man who had chosen her truth over the kingdom's comfort. "Elena," he said quietly. She looked at him. And for the first time, there was no fear between them, only understanding. "You are no longer protected," he said. A pause. "Because you no longer need protection." Elena looked down at the key in her hand, then at the horizon, at the kingdom that had tried to erase her, and failed. "I know," she said softly. Silence. Damien stepped back slightly. Then He did something the kingdom had never seen from him before. He knelt, not in submission to the crown, not in ceremony, but in choice. His voice was steady, but real. Will you become my duchess? The world seemed to stop again. Elena looked at him. Not the feared duke, not the ruthless noble, but the man who stood beside her through fire, blood, and truth. She thought of everything. The servant girl, the locked west wing, the assassin, the court, the execution decree. The truth of her mother, and the kingdom that had tried to erase her existence. She was no longer any of those things. She was something else. Something unbreakable. She exhaled slowly, then said, "Yes." Damien rose, and for the first time he smiled. Not as a duke, but as someone who had finally found something real in a world built on lies. Behind them, the kingdom of Ravenshire bowed in recognition. Not to fear, not to power, but to truth restored. And in that moment, Elena Hart ceased to exist. Elena Ravenshire was born. And the kingdom that once sold her now bowed before her name.